Okay, welcome back. It is time for hour number 3. And we're going to go to Hong Kong this hour and get some very interesting, as is always the case, analysis and insight and postulations from Yoichi Shimatsu. This time we're going to talk about Malaysian flight number 370. We know everyone else is. Get this one, there are now pushing 620 million results on a Google search for Malaysian jet MH370. I've never seen more theories. I've never seen more idiocy. I have never seen more mainstream media disinformation and misdirection for any story that was really just another airliner lost. We lose them all the time. The Air France jet. I mean, this one was clearly hijacked. We know that. The theories about who did it and why may or may not be resolved. We don't know. We do know that the Malaysian government has been lying. We do know that the U.S. government has been lying. They have hardly said anything, very little, and the less the government says, the more the suspicions rise. There are a number of people searching now, people by that I mean countries, and the Chinese are there. They're running airplanes. They've got an icebreaker. It's quite a rabbit hole. And the idea, of course, that we're on the verge of World War III in Ukraine has been swept off the news by this thing, which has been dominating the mainstream media pablum for the last couple of weeks. I feel very sorry for the loved ones of those lost on board. One can only hope that they may somewhere turn up as hostages. It is a possibility, not a probability, but clearly the plane was intentionally diverted. Yoichi has just sent to me a brand new paper about this. I'm going to be posting it with the night news batch shortly. It's entitled, Was a Tiny Microchip the Likely Cause of the Pentagon's Hijacking of Flight 370? Now, many of you listening understand what I'm talking about already, but I want to hear what Yoichi has to say about this. Thanks for being here. And this is a very interesting story. Freescale Software, of course, is the pivotal player. They had 20 advanced computer programmers on there, 12 Chinese, 8 Malaysians. There were some other interesting characters on board. How does it look to you, my friend?
Well, before we get into that, I apologize to your listeners about my absence. Of late, I was, right now, media, as you've been suggesting, is in turmoil. It's lack credibility. And so I've been pushed to work on several media projects, completing some and also trying to initiate some other projects. So I had to go to New York, sort of incognito, obviously. I don't want a lot of players to know about that. Where I met with a fellow at Columbia. He's a lecturer there at Columbia University, Jay Albin. And Jay is the guy who invented the word netizen. And he knew of the MH370 story, but I said, well, this is the proof of your theory, that millions, probably billions of people around the world don't believe in the commercial, the corporate media anymore, or in government press releases.
Right. And
now they're using the online world of the Internet to do their own research, their own communication, their own debating, their own reporting. And they, if anybody, have tracked down. These millions of people have been able to track down and break much of the mystery of the trajectory of the flight path, the actual flight path, the diversionary path as the plane did take. So this was, proof that, in a certain sense, that the Internet is still working despite all the corporate events to dumb it down, to take it over, as a tool, a vehicle, a research tool, communication tool for, hundreds of millions of people, millions of people around the world to seek out the truth in the news, what's really happening. And this has been, like you say, the 600 million hits versus the, flood of lies coming out of the official.
Well, your point is a very good one. This is interesting. The same thing happened at the Boston Marathon alleged bombing. People were Sandy Hook. People were able to watch the stories, and there are enough discerning people out there now that they are beginning to look through the obvious lies and beginning to parse together their own theories, which make far more sense than the overt lies being handed out to the sheep by the mainstream media and their corporate masters.
Yeah, this story has definitely been, driven. I call them the online sleuths, like online detectives. And the difference between this and Boston bombing and Sandy Hook was those were mainly focused in the United States, where, internet usage is very high, and people have a democratic tradition of, distrusting governments and always, since the American, even before the American Revolution, people felt the need to develop their own grassroots media. But this time it's really global. It's people all over the world, and in areas which the media has been fairly weak, in around the Indian Ocean basin. This is not exactly, the center of press freedom or even of literacy, but people are coming out in force. So this is really welcome that, worldwide there's been this huge response to this mystery, which is so obvious, and people smell a lie. They smell official lies here. You can't say that, these 600 million citations are wrong. People really smell a lie. They know, they smell a rat.
Yoshi, that's the one part of this whole thing that gives me a little bit of hope, and that's the ability of the average intelligent internet observer to wade into a story like this, to see the lies, pick up on the cadence of the lies, and to begin to look through them and piece together another and obviously far more viable scenario than you'll hear on CNN, Fox, ABC, any of the other crap. So,
Yeah. And the other thing here is, when we had all of the Edward Snowden, all of his revelations about the war on terror and how that was used to impose sort of like globalist media tyranny over the press and over the online community, this global surveillance, clearly this MH370 story is too big, I think, for even the NSA to cover. They cannot cover all the bases, all those people, do all the background checks. Impossible. There's just too many people involved. So finally, the force in numbers, the sheer critical mass has been released, and the NSA, which is deeply involved in this cover-up, fundamentally involved, is at their wit's end to track down who's who, what are they doing, who's communicating with you. So the system itself of information control is being busted by this story. So, this is really, I think, the timing couldn't be better. The timing could not be better for this to happen. Finally, to turn the corner on these information masters, these masters of the universe who want to, determine what we read, what we think, what we say. This has finally been broken, I think, around this very unlikely scenario of things that happen out of Malaysia, of all places. I mean, who would have known? This is not like Boston. It's not New York. It's not Chicago. We're talking about way out there. Yeah. In a piece of sea between Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam and the Philippines. It happened out there, and so this I'm very this I see as good. Although I do see a human obvious tragedy here. If there has been a hijacking, we could see some terrible crimes being committed by the people behind it, the powerful people who can control these sort of technologies. What would happen to these passengers? No wonder the family members are distraught. Because I think many of them don't believe the plane has crashed. The theory in the beginning among all the survivors is that the passengers landed safely on some airstrip somewhere and were held hostage. They know that they're demanding the release of their family members from imprisonment of Guantanamo-type rendition flight of a whole civilian passenger jet. So this was an unprecedented kidnap of people, of the world public, of civilians. And then, this is what maybe, the U.S., Britain, France, now used to accuse the Palestinian terrorists of doing. Now, who are the terrorists? Okay, who are the terrorists in this case? And when we look at the evidence, obviously, the powers that be, obviously powerful people who have a vested interest in this software company in Freescale. The technology and the micro is very the micro computer chip software that Freescale puts out. But before we go into that, I might say when I just got back, so I missed the show yesterday on across the Arctic, the North Pole, okay, from New York to Hong Kong, really long moving flight.
Yeah.
But luckily, we left in the morning, so I was able to get photographs of the Arctic Sea. Okay, the Arctic, what do you call it, ice cap north of Greenland. And there is no ice cap left. I mean, the ice is all broken. We're talking about, this is March, okay? We're seeing really cold weather across the United States, the Midwestern states, the East Coast, right? Frigid weather, incredible storms. But the sea ice is broken up all north of Greenland. And then when you go further north of there, all the Arctic area is sort of under this dense cloud of humidity that you can bear, a fog, okay? There's a vast fog over much of Canada, Greenland, and the Arctic.
You could not see the polar region too well, but right up to there above Greenland, you're seeing broken ice.
That's well inside the Arctic Circle. That should be like, I've flown up there before.
Yeah, should be solid.
Normally, let's say 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the solid sheet of ice, some of it would look very broken up, like hillocks of ice. So it would basically be a solid sheet. There may be a few longer channels or crevices, but right now there's the broken pieces everywhere. There's giant holes in this thing. And as I've argued, starting 3 years ago with the Fukushima meltdown, the Arctic ozone layer was destroyed by the atmospheric fallout of radioactive isotopes flying over the North Pole polar region, destroying that. And then basically since then, the ice cap has been, it's been destructive. Basically, it's melting away, and ships can now sail across from Europe to Asia,
right,
over there with the help of a small ice. You don't need a giant iceberg. You just need something to push away these icebergs, basically.
Yeah.
So it's now just a cluster of icebergs, basically, larger and smaller of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got photos of that, so I'm thinking maybe I'll get out something.
Did you take a counter with you? Did you do any readings at altitude?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't do any readings because, I wanted to take a little break from my radiation study.
Don't blame you.
I needed a little bit of a break. Just mentally, it's so stressful that going over there, I was just trying to just get out of the stress of dealing with all this. Obviously, stressful.
Well, good for you. You had a little vacation, and you got
sort of a vacation amid this talk of all this new media and all that. Anyway, back to this Malaysian story. Okay.
Now, if I might, let me preface what you're going to say.
Yeah, please do.
The best.
I'm looking at it from a technical perspective and maybe a trade commercial perspective.
Yeah. Now, the best. Let me say not the best. The most interesting overlay to this event has to do with Anwar Ibrahim, the Malaysian Muslim, who was just, they say set up, but convicted of sodomy, sentenced to 5 years in prison. Captain Shah, allegedly, received of course, the Malaysian police have reversed themselves 180 degrees on this and said, no, there was no phone call, after saying there was a phone call to the cockpit moments before the plane pulled away from the gate, I guess, and took off. 2 minutes long, from a SIM card or a phone card bought by a woman with a fake ID. Then they said it didn't happen. So this guy was in contact with somebody before this plane took off. Maybe it didn't, I don't know, have something to do with what happened to the plane. The idea of him going aloft, and then while he's up there, many hours, 5-6 hours to do this, another group hands the Malaysian government a list of demands, including the release of Anwar Ibrahim, or the plane goes down. And it is postulated that the Malaysian government said, Captain Shah, bring the plane back, there'll be no deals. No deals with terrorists, no deals with hijackers, and that was the end of the plane. Boom. So that's interesting. Now, what you've got is probably, you say technical, but it is really interesting. So let's go ahead and kind of walk through that.
Okay, well, first of all, with this, I'm very familiar with the Anwar case because I was in Southeast Asia during the start of the Asian financial crisis. 2000. Anwar was he was known as the IMF boy. That's what they call him. And
what they call him? Call him a what?
The IMF boy. Okay.
I see.
Along with one of the prime ministers of Thailand back then, who were particularly open homosexuals, okay? And as a result, they got along very good with the international banking community.
Okay,
right?
so he was not, these were not trumped up charges. Okay.
No. I mean, everyone knew it at the time, that these guys were sort of in league together in opening up the Southeast Asian economies to the IMF, to the foreign banks, the foreign investors. And at the core of this was sort of this international gay mafia. I'm not speaking against gays or anything like that. I'm just saying that's just the group that was in power then. It was more important that they were financial bankers and rich people.
Right.
And that obviously in Malaysia, the key person in that whole play of the foreign exchange rates, which suddenly the Asian currencies were devalued and there was capital flight, all the foreign investors pulled their money out, was of course George Soros, which then Prime Minister Mohammed Mahathir, criticized him that Soros is behind this, was trying to destabilize all Southeast Asia. To get a base there. And this hasn't really stopped. I was in Thailand when there was there were military officers aligned with the royal family. I knew one of the aristocratic families then who threatened to shoot Soros if he went to the Oriental Hotel, tried to come to Thailand. And Soros, he backed down. He didn't come because he realized these guys aren't kidding. They know what this game is about. They're in international circles. They know this was a deliberate attack on the economy. And this attack has been going on and on and on and on. And all of former Prime Minister Mahathir's NGO, he's a real peace activist. He's a real advocate of nonviolence.
Correct.
And it's very difficult because he lives in the Islamic world. He's Muslim, and he's arguing against violence by Muslims as well as by the Western world. So it's a tough position to be in peace. But, these groups are constantly under attack. I wrote a series of articles about how Google attacked his group. Google set up in Southeast Asia and has been running down all sorts of critics of Israel, just attacking the heck out of me, posting warning signs on computers, hacking computers. This one website called the Fifth Estate in Jakarta was taken down repeatedly, lost their domain name. Bob Finnegan, the former editor of Jakarta Post, has been fighting him very valiantly, with his back against the wall, against this, massive attack by Google, the Israelis over there, the various Israeli fronts operating out of Singapore, and out of, there are many other players in the financial community and all that. So against this background, you see that Malaysia is a country under siege. Well, it's Muslim-dominated, and you got to understand it's one of the it is probably the major country outside of China and Japan with its own oil drilling, exploration, and production equipment technology. The Petronas towers that you see, the twin towers that are far more beautiful than the ones that were in New York, that's owned by Petronas, the national oil company, which is operating all across Southeast Asia, in Africa, in the Arab world. If you're a small country, predominantly Muslim, and you're doing your own policy, you're sort of like Venezuela, right? You're going to be under attack constantly. These people are going to attack you. The Israeli interests, along with, Exxon, Shell, BP, all of these big oil.
They are absolutely, they're grinding Venezuela into the dirt. Yeah. They're doing their damnedest because Venezuela has about 5 trillion barrels of recoverable oil. Trillion. Yeah.
And Malaysia is the Venezuela of Southeast Asia. So you got to understand, these people have been trying to undermine it. They've been supporting protests, doing every dirty trick they can to wipe. In Thailand, it says Thailand joins it, is trying to build pipelines, trying to do cooperation. And there's an Asian market Southeast Asian market that will form, something like the EU, on January 1st. So they're going to form a common market, mainly for energy reasons. They need to share gas and then supply electricity to each other because all these borders are not necessarily totally rational economically. So this is the reason they're going to do it. So they're under massive assault now, and this airliner was hijacked amid this point. And I say hijacked because today you can electronically hijack a plane. That was a great lesson of 9/11.
Yeah.
That technology was developed by Israeli companies.
Yep.
Israeli companies whose executives and programmers are all from the Israeli Defense Force. And they're the ones who also created the waterfall infrastructure security software, okay?
Yeah.
In other words, the Stuxnet virus was developed by these people against Siemens software, against a German software company. Who else would they attack except the Germans? And to basically what they call remote cockpit where you can put it on your laptop. You can actually control it from a laptop computer. That was their goal, and they did it. And in fact, most about then they pulled all of their story. When I started writing about them, they pulled all of that off the internet. You know, they got alarmed and pulled. So,
by the way,
they're trying to cover their tracks.
If I remember correctly, Rabbi Zakheim was the comptroller of the Pentagon just before 9/11, when that $2 or $3 trillion went missing, and Rabbi Zakheim left that job shortly after 9/11 and went to work, if I remember right, with the company that makes these override remote control systems for airliners. I think that's right.
They took the money and invested. There you go. Yeah, because they developed. They invented that technology earlier, but it wasn't entirely perfected.
That's correct.
Nor was it commercialized. Okay, for the airliners. Now, to use it defensively after the lesson on 9/11, United, Boeing and all the other, everyone in the aircraft industry wanted to be able to remotely control a plane in case something happened to the crew. If there was a fire or something inside the cabin or something, where there were a terrorist incident. They could take it over themselves, okay? So they had to perfect the technology and get it out to market. So it's been out there, this technology, but they've been very secretive about it, and I hope these online sleuths begin to dig out the whole deep history of this thing so we can get to the mystery. There's a lot of mysteries of what happens to planes and,
okay, we got a break, coming up. I was correct. Rabbi Zakheim went to work for, let me see if I can find it here. Okay, 2004. Okay, yes, he did. He went to work for the company called SPC. That's the company that manufactures remote control software and operation systems for airliners. So Zakheim, presiding over the loss, gosh, I wonder where it went. How about the Bank of Tel Aviv? $2.3 trillion, greases his way out of the pentagram and goes to work for SPC, the company that makes the remote control systems that very likely flew the planes into the World Trade Center towers. We don't know what hit the pentagram, but it was not.
Well, 2 points just before we go on break. Follow the money, right? The money's important. And the second thing is passengers don't count. Civilian passengers, what human rights? If you don't consider them human, they don't have any rights. Okay, that's the 2 points we got to remember, and that applies to this Malaysia.
Okay, very good. Back in just a minute. Hang on. Okay, back with Yoichi Shimatsu. We're taking a look at MH370, Flight 370, and what he thinks may have happened there. It's a very interesting technological aspect of this story having to do with that freelance software company. Again, 20 programmers, senior programmers, very smart people on board this plane, 12 Chinese, 8 Malaysians or others. Tell us more.
Okay, now Freescale is called, is a software and it's a chip producer, silicon chip producer, based in Austin, Texas. And its board members and executives.
See, now there's another weird, excuse me, I got to jump in here. Huh? There's another weird tie into Austin, Texas, which seems to be the nexus of a lot of Intel stuff, a lot of Internet stuff, a lot of stuff in general. Austin, go ahead.
You got the University of Texas there, but you got to remember, George W. Bush was governor of the state when all that stuff was developing. Okay?
Yeah.
So it makes total sense why that's all there, and they're all part of this sort of Bush-Cheney network. In fact, Freescale is most powerful board members formerly worked with the Carlyle Group, okay? The Carlyle Group was very much associated with Pappy, with George Bush Sr., all right? So this is like a real made-in-Texas operation, as well as its predecessor company, because it used to be the design division for Motorola, the big, which is based in Chicago and had big operations in Texas. And the other big company is Texas Instruments. Many of the board members were with Texas Instruments previously. So this is very at the heart of both not only computer development, software development, but also military industrial technology, okay, military technology essentially. And Freescale is that kind of company. It produces a lot of your little microchips and controllers for cars. Cars use them in various parts. We don't have these old carburetors anymore. Everything's computer controlled, and more so. They make a lot of money there. But their main customer is still the Pentagon, okay, especially the U.S. Air Force. They're very strong in selling all the stuff. In every missile, you got controllers and chips and all sorts. Every tank, every jet fighter, massive amount of intelligent hardware in there. Okay, so, however, manpower, as you know, in the States is very tough. It's very competitive, because the United States graduates a lot of people. A lot of them go on their own and all that. So you end up at every tech company, you see a lot of foreigners coming in, migrate from India, from Pakistan, from China, from Korea, but less so from Korea now because they're busy over there, Taiwan. And so Freescale has had to open up design centers, okay? This is for chip design and for all the circuits and all that go with that, controllers and all that, in both Malaysia and in China. And you got to remember that this flight, this MH370, was flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, China, which were places that Freescale has as design centers. Now, of all of the recent technologies come out with, technologies that come out with, the most recent came out early last year, which is the world's smallest microcontroller, which is less than 2 millimeters on either side. So it's a tiny little thing. In fact, they call it a swallowable controller. Okay, a tiny little chip. Let's say if you're taking, you need a little surgery in your, let's say for an ulcer or something like this. Yeah. You can actually attach those surgical tools.
Easy.
Control. This trip will control that surgery. You can pre-program it because they could identify exactly what has to be done and figure out what, these are things that can do some thinking. They have logic functions in them. All right. So basically, it came out with this tiny little thing. It's called Kinesis. Okay, Kinesis, and the code number is KL02. KL stands for Kuala Lumpur in version 2. Okay, the second model of this thing. So in other words, Kinesis was basically developed in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. All right, and that's what this team of 20 was working on. Now the problem is, Malaysia was a super design center, but it's not like a great manufacturing or testing center because this company, Freescale, has something like 5 different offices, research centers in China in different cities, and a major production center in Tianjin, which is a port of Beijing, which presumably this team was heading to. Why were they heading to there? Well, you have to test this chip in various industrial applications that they can do in China, okay? And this chip, obviously, very, very important to the U.S. military to maintain its strategic advantage over all the other world's other military powers. Okay, now the whole trend in military development in chips and in weapons is to go smaller and smaller and smaller to miniaturize, okay? And you've heard of these drones, okay? They're the size of a dragonfly, right, for espionage purposes. You've heard of these, they were publicized a couple of years ago. Well, you can make them as small as a fly with this thing, okay?
That's right.
So you wouldn't even see this thing approaching. It would be spying on you, or it could deliver, let's say, some sort of toxic agent or a virus to you. Perfect for warfare.
Yep.
Yeah, they're very important.
And think where we're, Yoshi, your point is so well taken. Think where we'll be if we survive in another 4 or 5 years. These things will be inhalable.
Yeah, inhalable. Yeah. It'll go up your nose. Yeah. This thing, inhalable. You can swallow it. You won't be able to detect it anywhere.
You won't even know.
This is definitely the fly on the wall technology. In other words, you won't see it. You won't notice it. Yeah. Also for space technology, if you need to make a satellite killer, you can use this microchip to make something the size of less than a baseball to go after and puncture and destroy a satellite. If you want to make a small nuclear bomb and put them in orbit, hundreds of bombs in orbit, you can do that with this chip. And again, this chip, being a controller, it doesn't have to just obey orders. You can just put it into, you can insert a program that just says, in these scenarios, This is the hierarchy of things you will do, okay? These are responses you will take. So therefore, after that, it's self-guided. It's on its own. It'll figure out what to do, how to adapt. If someone's trying to shoot it down, it'll get around that. It'll have programs in there to help it get it. So this is basically a very thinking man's machine up there that will, up there in space, on the ground, under your coffee table, all right? So therefore, the Pentagon does not want this to fall in the hands of the Chinese, the Malaysians, or anyone who's close to the Iranians. Now, the thing is, we look at the leadership structure of Freescale. Anyone can look at this online. Its older board members were with the Carlyle Group, TI, Texas Instruments, which have an interest as rapidly as possible, okay? This is called dual-use technology. You can use it for civilian or for warfare to get this stuff out to the market so they can reward their investors, okay? Pappy Bush wants to get his money back as fast as he can. So therefore, he wants to sell this technology to anyone else. He doesn't care about the arms. In fact, the fiercer the arms race, the more groups like Carlyle will make money. So it's in their interest to get this out to the civilian economy, and the Chinese use it for military purposes. All the better. Then we'll make a smaller and better one. Okay, this is their thinking.
That's
now the
right.
problem with Freescale, however, is not owned by Pappy Bush. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we have to take a break, though.
Okay.
Hold on, and we'll come right
Okay,
back.
all right. Let's get into the ownership of who really owns it. Okay.
All right, this will be very interesting, as always. All right, Yoshi, right on top of things, as usual, and we'll be back. All right, let's get right back to our conversation with Yoshi about Flight 370, the computer aspect of it all, Freescale. Who are the owners of Freescale?
Okay, Freescale, while the management is with the Carlyle Group, which is and TI, Texas Instruments, people are very strong into the George Bush circles of Texas. The actual ownership, however, is by a private equity company called Blackstone Group, whose head is Stephen Schwartzman. And the major shareholders, when it was formed, was the Lehman, the Lehman Group, Lehman Brothers of 2008 fame. They've basically been smashed and are gone.
They're gone.
And there was Kuhn Loeb and all. They took a hit on the Lehman thing, too. So since then, the ownership, all those shares have been controlled by one Lord Jacob Rothschild, of London. So basically, Blackstone is a Rothschild-controlled entity. Now, we know the Rothschild family were the main sponsors and financiers and proponents of the State of Israel, the Zionist movement, okay? And another interesting fact about Malaysia is that the opposition leader, Anwar Ibrahim, who was connected with the pilot, which are the political guru for this pilot, he is one of the few Muslim politicians who support the Islamic recognition of Islamic State of the State of Israel, okay? Because right now Malaysia does not allow Israeli passports to, people with Israeli passports to come in the country. I mean, they come in with Jews can come in with American passports, but not Israel. They don't recognize. They support a boycott of Israel and all that. So Anwar Ibrahim took this really extreme position in the Muslim world down there in the Muslim, in the whole Muslim world as a whole of supporting the State of Israel, okay? So that's why he's called the IMF boy, okay? He's in there with the big bankers, the Rothschild banking interest. So basically, we see there's a split in this company, okay, in the leadership of this company, which has come to a head because obviously the Rothschilds and other Zionists do not want to see this technology being, let's say, sold by China to Iran, okay? Let's say if Chinese makes these chips, that Iran will get these, and then before long, maybe Hezbollah and Hamas people will be putting these on little remote devices and all that, and they can get a lot more bang for their buck, or their dinar, or whatever they're spending, shekel or whatever they're spending over there. So, obviously, they want to crack down on this technology. They do not want this technology, this Kinesis KL02, to come into civilian production in China. And when you've got a 20-member team from Freescale, Malaysia, where this chip was invented, coming with their laptop computers with their hard drives, the U.S. And their what do you call it, little sticks there, portable sticks, getting on a plane to go to Beijing to test this.
Mm-hmm.
Is it any question that the Israeli neocon nexus at the Pentagon would hijack that plane? Is there any question at all? I don't have any questions about it.
So
of course they'll do it.
You're talking about thumb drive.
You think the IDF doesn't have the experience to do this? You don't think that the neocons have special forces?
Easy.
They got people in the U.S. Air Force, all these evangelical officers around Michael Hayden. The Air Force Academy produces the evangelicals who are sworn to defend the state of Israel, consider themselves modern-day Israelites, and they're operating the satellites, the AWACS, P-3 Orion planes up there. They're all over the airspace there. They can easily hijack this thing. And they run these eavesdropping stations, in Singapore, in ships off the Philippines. In Sri Lanka, there's a giant NSA station there. In Jindalee, Western Australia, a giant station there. And they control all the messaging there, all the signals there. So they can monitor this plane, they can hijack this plane, they can land it. The plane turned in the southernmost atoll of the Maldives. There's a big diving resort there, which has a small airport for seaplanes and small aircraft.
Not
in which
big
the
enough.
U.S. government worked with the Maldivian government to put in a radar station. So that's a station, that's a pivot where this plane turns, and it'll go southward instead of westward, it'll go southward right down into Diego Garcia, which is a major U.S. airport.
It was a straight shot, pretty much a straight shot, exactly.
Straight shot, and then it obviously landed there. Can you hide the plane there? There's underground bunkers everywhere. You can hide B-52s. Why can't you hide much smaller airlines? There's huge naval bases there too. You have submarines. Everything is hidden there underneath. It looks like just a sandy atoll, but it's one of the biggest bases in the world. So obviously the plane was captured. These 20 people were taken off the plane, debriefed. As far as the rest of the hostages, who knows? Shark bait. Just run them and toss them down there next to Western Australia, where you're going to plant the rest of the evidence. And I mentioned in my first article, this is nothing new. It happened to Amelia Earhart, back in the 30s when Roosevelt, President Franklin Roosevelt, sent her on the spy mission. In the building bases, air bases. So she was captured, put on trial. She was executed. But her plane, once there was a huge outcry in the Western world, the Japanese military, they dumped these reports further to the south.
Now hold on, Yoshi, hold on a second. Amelia Earhart captured, executed. I've read stories about this in the past.
Yeah, she was put on trial. I mean, there were Japanese survivors who said she was put on a trial with her co-pilot, and they were executed.
Really?
This was in Saipan, in the Marianas.
So they transported her to Saipan, put her on trial.
Her plane was going south, was heading south over these unregistered new Japanese airfields that Japanese constructing right next to these islands controlled by the British Americans. So they flew her plane back with her in it back for trial. Then they took pieces of the plane when they realized that the Western media was really getting up that she was more important. They just thought she was some minor spy here, and they killed her. Mm-hmm. I went to her school, Purdue. She was, I've been to the field where she flies. I've walked by Earhart Hall every day. I was there at the school, so I know her story.
You went to Purdue. I forgot about that. So okay, they executed her. They executed her, and Noonan, her co-pilot. I believe his name was Noonan. Were they buried?
Noonan. Yeah.
Were they buried somewhere?
They tried to blame them for being a bad and running out of gas. Of course they ran out of gas. They went off course to do all this recovery work, and they were low on gas and probably were forced to land. But probably the Japanese fighter plane forced them to land. That's probably what happened.
Did they bury her? Do we know, or did they just cut her up and throw her in the?
Well, they said the witnesses said, she was buried. She was buried in a graveyard outside Japan, but that the plane subsequently, it was on display for a while, but then subsequently disappeared. And then pieces of that plane surfaced on a couple of other islands and supposedly underwater around one of the islands. So, obviously the Japanese military moved her plane as a decoy.
Yeah.
Basically, they want to tell Americans, we didn't kill her. She crash landed there. She lost her way and crash landed. It's not our fault. Okay.
This would have been the war is heating up, and for Japan to execute America's biggest aviation hero would not have done well for the Japan war effort at that time.
No, and this was done by the local command. They're down here in the island, right?
Yeah.
Communication not so good. Then Tokyo foreign office goes, oh my gosh, do you realize what happened here? Do something about this now to fix it, okay? So right now you're probably, in the last couple of weeks, you've got these probably alarm calls from the State Department to the Pentagon. What is going on? You can't just take a civilian airliner and do what happened in 9/11 anymore. This is a different administration.
No, I got it. Yeah.
You understand?
Sure.
Do something now. So they're going to take pieces of just get a welding torch to it.
Oh, they'll dump pieces of it somewhere. Yeah.
Southwestern Australia. What's the guy, Eddie Brand? There's nothing down there. What's he going to do down in Antarctica? There's no landing. There's not any brain. There's no reason to be there in Western Australia. And the flight path wouldn't have made any sense. It's too far to the east. He should have been further out to the west, if that was the case. If he flew over the Maldives. As seen by eyewitnesses, saw the plane flying very, very low. And so, obviously, they're prisoners at the former rendition. There's probably still and Afghanistan, Yemen.
You think they're still on Diego?
There's a prison there. Of course there's a prison there. Of course Diego Garcia was used. He was very close to getting people out of the Arabian Peninsula in Africa.
So you think that Yoshi, you think the 20 programmers are still alive then? Well,
the ones who are cooperating, maybe they took out a few as an example. The ones who don't want to cooperate. They'll give them new passport, new identity. And unfortunately, what's going to happen to anyone who cooperates, they're going to be given a drug cocktail for a few months, okay?
They won't remember their name after a while. I got it.
Yeah, there'll be guys like Jason Bourne. They don't know who they are. All they know, they've been working for the U.S. government for the past 15 years, okay?
Oh, yeah.
They're working somewhere in northern Canada near a coal mine where the NSA has an encryption base, and they'll be quietly working away there.
Interesting. Okay, very, very interesting.
Of course they're going to do that. And as for the rest of the passengers, they're basically shark-based, Basically, you have to dump some bodies in the ocean there if they ever manage to locate their location. They'll just eject them out of torpedo tubes, right? You got Polaris missile tubes, right? No problem. Dumping bodies out.
Wouldn't be a lot of fun for the crew to have to load that kind of a cargo up to eject it, but okay, sure. They could take them out on a boat, tie weights to their feet.
You freeze them. You're just taking these ice cubes that look like about these 5 foot tall ice cubes, and you just load them into a torpedo tube, okay?
Yeah.
And they fire out into the water and basically put a life jacket on them.
Wow.
That's how the job is done. That's how these guys operate.
Yeah.
This is Michael Hayden, the guy who built the NSA into the monstrosity that everyone showed it to be, okay? These are the people who militarize space, and they intend to maintain a monopoly over space warfare. These are the people snooping at you in the city parks, making sure that if you're a nudist, that they got your pictures so they can blackmail you at your job. These are the kind of people we're dealing with that are in the government. And unfortunately, I don't know what the Supreme Court or the federal prosecutors are doing. Nothing. Nothing that protects the rights of the American people.
No, it's those days are
country to the rest of the world.
Those days are gone. Totally gone. Listen, that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I'll be putting
all the pieces do fit together. It just has a complicated picture, that's all. Okay?
Gotcha.
So, the whole thing, the picture's so complicated. Yeah, the pieces look like they're divergent, but they all fit into this larger picture here. It's a big area out there. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that, Yoshi. Talk to you next Monday.
Okay,
be well.
Let's get back to Fukushima then. We have a lot of backlog to do there.
Indeed. Okay. Talk to you then. All right. That's our program tonight. Lots of information again, and we'll be back tomorrow night and give